Hey, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Racha HaKodash, and double honor to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace, love, salutations, and blessings to the house of David, which is the elect. And just a quick article I just want to touch on, a topic relating to prophecy, of course, because we're in a time of all things being fulfilled, right? All these end time prophecies, which we're seeing happening right before our very eyes. Yahweh Bashem Yahushai is, making good on his word. As he said, it is faithful and true. Okay, so, we continue to watch for these things and, to bring them out so that the hopeful elect can stay, firm in their faith, right? Stay rooted in their faith, but, by seeing, the words of Yahweh Bashem Yahushai come to pass. Okay. And, this article is dealing with the beast, right, which is, the NATO EU countries. And, they came to an agreement with America, right, Trump, on this trade tariff deals. However, you have a lot of these EU countries or EU leaders, should I say, EU leaders of these various countries are not happy with the deal that was made between the I think that's the EU president, von Leer, something to that effect, Ursula von der Leyen. Okay, so that's the president of the European Commission. So they announced today, which is the 28th. Maybe this happened yesterday. I think the actual agreement happened yesterday, but they announced it today that they came to an agreement. And as you see, French Prime Minister slams EU trade deal as submission. The newly signed agreement represents a, quote, dark day for Europe, Francois Bayrou has said. So French Prime Minister Francois has condemned the new trade deal between Washington and Brussels, accusing the EU of yielding to the U.S. coercion. On Sunday, European Commissioner President Ursula von der Leyen finalized a controversial agreement with President Donald Trump, averting looming 30% tariffs from the U.S. in exchange for a flat 15% levy on most goods. In return, the EU agreed to open its agreed to open its markets to American exports and impose no tariffs on them. Von der Leyen Trump agreement. It's a dark day when an alliance of free peoples gathered to affirm their values and defend their interests results to submit, Bayrou wrote on X on Monday. Trump announced on Sunday that the EU will also purchase $750 billion worth of U.S. energy exports. The bloc will also buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, which a lot of that equipment is going to be going to Ukraine to fight against Russia, right? They're using the Ukrainians as a proxy, army, proxy military, which Russia already said that any weapons that is being used, are being sent to Ukraine, they're going to look at it as, not only they're going to war Ukrainians, but the ones who are sending those weapons as well. So, and you already had talk today, as you see up here, Trump reduced the Russia-Ukraine deadline to 10 to 12 days. So he first made it 50 days, but now he's saying he's giving them less than a week to, make a ceasefire deal, or there's going to be, consequences, right? Starting with sanctions. But you had Medvedev. He basically said that, I think it was Medvedev, it could have been the other guy. I forgot the other guy's name. Dmitry Lavo, one of them. They basically said that the rhetoric that Trump is speaking, if I could probably look for that, let me see. Just as a side note, let me see. Medvedev. I can't even spell his name right. Trump war threats. Let me see what comes up. Yeah, here you go. So Russia's Medvedev says Trump's ultimatum, right? Because that ultimatum was they have between 10 to 12 days to come to a deal, or there's going to be some consequences, right? Which I believe Trump made mention before with sanctions, but we know these things are only just escalating to the war, which is written, right? World War III, okay, between Russia, America, and various different other countries that's going to be involved as well, right? A world war. But it says what could lead to war. See? So former Russian President Dmitry said on a post on X on Monday that U.S. President Donald Trump was playing the ultimatum game with Russia, and that such a approach could lead to a war involving the United States. Medvedev wrote, "Each new ultimatum is a threat and a step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with Trump's own country." Okay, so this is the time that we're in. We continuously are beating this war drum, sounding the alarm as Yahweh Bashem Yahweh Shai has commanded us to do, because we are getting closer, ever so close to this prophecy being fulfilled. Now, of course, we know that there's the mark of the beast that must be brought to pass before that. But we see all of these things are happening, at a rapid pace. The Lord is escalating everything, okay? Because, the time of our redemption is drawing nigh, which is why Yahweh Shai said, when you see these things to start to come to pass, let me get that, right? Because you got naysayers out here that's saying that, this ain't going to happen in our lifetimes. Well, you calling the Lord, right, a liar, right? And the Lord said, Lord is not a liar, right? Yahweh is a man that he cannot lie, and Yahweh Shai is the spirit of truth. So, right, or the spirit of truth. Here, Luke 21 verse 28. And when these things begin to come to pass, right, just like in the book of 2nd Ezra, it says, "Measure thou the time diligently in itself, and when thou see part of the signs past that I have told thee before, know that it is the very same time." So it says, when these things begin to come to pass, then look up and lift up your heads, for your redemption draweth nigh. Okay, our redemption is drawing nigh, and seeing all these things taking shape. Right, these talks between Russia and America, with the 48ers and Iran, all right, Iran and Russia becoming more close, right? You got what's going over there in the Pacific Ocean with China, Taiwan, and you just had Australia and UK said that they will go to war with China if something happens with Taiwan. So everybody is in a war mindset. Right. Let's not forget the last few years you had these European countries and other countries telling their own citizens to shift to a wartime mindset. Right. But yet here in America, Babylon the Great, you got these people that are dwelling carelessly that still think that this evil day is afar off. Right. and I'm speaking about Jake particularly. They think that these things, cannot and will not happen. But that is why Yahweh Shai said that it's going to come upon them as a thief, because they were not watching. They weren't taking heed. But going back to this, it says he claimed, where were we? It says Trump announced on Sunday that the EU will also purchase $750 billion worth of U.S. energy and exports. The bloc will also buy hundreds of billions of dollars worth of military equipment, he claimed, and invest $600 billion into the American economy. Von der Leyen told the media on Sunday that the timeline for these investments and purchases align with the remaining 3 years of the U.S. president's term. The deal has also drawn pushback from other French officials. European Affairs Minister Benjamin Haddad has criticized the unbalanced deal, warning that the stability it brings is temporary. The EU should activate its so-called anti-coercion instrument to address the imbalance in trade with the US, he said on X. French right-wing politician Marine Le Pen has slammed the agreement as a political, economic, and moral fiasco. The deal's unfair terms amount to an outright surrender for French industry and for our energy and military sovereignty, she wrote. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said in a speech on Monday that the trade pact represents a very hard blow for European economic development, clearly leading to further deindustrialization of Europe and capital flight from the continent into the U.S. So, this is them clearly not with what the president of the European Union did, right? European Commission, I should say, did. And these countries now are becoming more and more, divided in, their stance. And they're having more of a negative look toward America. Now, what I also did, let's see if this is here. Yeah, so what I did is on Gronk, I asked, are a lot of European leaders upset with the EU-US tariff deal? Right, so this just gives a little overview of what it is. It says leaders express concern or discontent. French leadership, which we just read, so I'll need to read that. Dutch Prime Minister, the Dutch PM expressed a preference for no tariffs, indicating dissatisfaction with the 15% tariff rate, which is higher than the previous average of 4.8%. So he raised it almost what is that? 4 times the amount, right? And about 3 times the amount of we could say about 3 times the amount of what it initially was. It says Belgian Prime Minister. The Belgian Prime Minister described the deal as a moment of relief, but not a celebration, reflecting on a resigned acceptance rather than enthusiasm. Hungarian leader Viktor Orban, while not explicitly upset, Orban's colorful remark that Trump ate von der Leyen for breakfast suggests he views the deal as a U.S. victory, potentially aligning with sentiments critical of the EU's negotiation position. Leaders expressing cautious support or relief. So German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says, welcome the deal as averting damaging trade war, particularly for Germany's export-oriented economy, noting that the tariffs on the EU cars was nearly halved from 27.5% to 15%. However, he acknowledged the substantial damage to Germany, particularly its automotive industry, and expressed a desire for further easing of trade barriers. All right. Italian Prime Minister Giorgia called the deal positive for avoiding potential devastating consequences, but emphasized the need to review details, indicating cautious support rather than full endorsement. So, of course, she's going to say it was a huge deal. Irish Prime Minister notes that the tariffs, while lower than threatened, still makes trade more expensive and challenging, particularly for Ireland, which relies heavy on the U.S. market. Right? His response reflects cautious acceptance rather than enthusiasm. So let's go here. Broader sentiment and context. Despondency and resignation. Posts on X and some reports describe a general move of despondency and resignation among EU leaders, with many viewing the deal unbalanced. The EU agreed to zero tariffs on certain U.S. goods, significant investments in purchases of U.S. energy and weapons, while facing a 15% tariffs on 70% of its exports to the U.S., more than triple the previous 4.8 average. It's this is asymmetry fuels perceptions of a U.S. win. So you have a lot of these. Let's go to the summary, right? You have a lot of people, these leaders in EU, are not happy, right? And the actual citizens of EU also, because they're going to feel it in their pockets, right? Things are going to get more expensive for them over there in Europe, which things have already been getting expensive for them, you know? So it says, while not all European leaders are openly upset, there is significant discontent, particularly from French leaders who view the deal as always stumble on this word. Capitulation, right? Views the deal as capitulation. Others, like Germany Merz and Italy's Meloni, expressed cautious relief, valuing the avoidance of a trade war, but acknowledging economic drawbacks. The Irish and Dutch leaders highlight the deal's cost, while von der Leyen emphasizes its stabilizing effects. The general mood, as reflected in reports and ex-posts, leaned toward resignation, with many leaders accepting the deal as a lesser of evil, but criticizing its imbalance in the EU's negotiating approach. So, all in all, the point of this, lesson or video is showing that this isn't bringing America and EU closer, right? This isn't making their bond stronger. This is causing more of the ties, right? If you look at it like a string, this is like cutting with the strings, right? A string off. So it's making their ties weaker. Okay, and the scriptures speaks about how the beast was going to hate the whore, right? And back before any of this was going on, right? Back before you had any tensions between America and EU, you had the men of the Lord saying that something was going to take place, right? Something was going to happen. The Lord was going to cause something to happen that was going to cause America's own allies, some of America's own allies, to get involved as an enemy in this up and coming war and shoot missiles at America. All right. And that prophecy is here in Revelation 17, verse, go straight to the point, verse 12. So it says, in the 10 horns, right, which the 10 horns represents, the original 10 countries, that made up the EU, but now, it's about 28. Okay. It's about 28 countries that make up the EU. But it says, which thou sawest are 10 kings. And it's not speaking about literal kings, but, kingdoms or countries, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind and shall give their power and strength unto the beast, right? Because the beast is the collective NATO, right? Collective NATO / EU, because although it's the EU is made up of, different countries, they move as a unit, you see, and a lot of their GDP, that's something that has been being spoken of a lot lately, is they're increasing their military spending toward the NATO military. So they all are collectively with this one mind saying where we need to give our power and strength unto the NATO or the collective army that they have, right? Which is more military spending into the NATO army, right? Which once again is a collective. It's an army made up of collective European and America and I believe Canada countries, right? But majority of them are where in Europe. It says these show. Nope, I wanted to jump. Yep, I'm gonna jump to 16. So that explains that. So when you jump to 16, it says, in the 10 horns. So we just explained what the 10 horns were, which thou sawest upon the beast, These shall hate the whore. Now, the whore, when you read up, and there's plenty of lessons that breaks down Revelation 17, 1 all the way down to 18. But the whore is Babylon the Great, okay? And she that sitteth upon the beast. All right. As you read in verse 1, it says, come hither, and I will show unto thee the judgment of the whore that sitteth upon many waters. Okay, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. Okay, and how has the inhabitants of the earth been made drunk? With the wine of her. This her speaking specifically about the whore, her fornication, her ideologies. It's through, the conquest, right? It's through, the military conquest. It's through the sanctions that America puts on countries, right? The coercion, as we were just reading. This was a coercion that Trump did to, its own allies. Because when you read in Revelation 18, it tells you how Babylon the Great, all of the kings of the earth lived deliciously with her, because America is the number one imported country. So a lot of countries get their revenue, right? Get their GDP, gross domestic product, right? Influx by selling products to America. See? But America says, well, if you want us to do business with you, then you got to adopt our quote unquote democracy, right? You got to adopt our way of doing things, right? You had, I think it was Uganda back during the Biden administration. You had Kamala Harris go over there and tell them that if you didn't allow and accept the alphabet community, give them, freedom of give them liberty and freedom to be sodomites over there, then we're going to, sanction you. We're going to do all these different things. And that's how they made the earth drunk with the wine of her fornications. All right. I believe if you go into this in a different translation, yep, it says, and the kings of the world have committed adultery with her, and the people who belong to this world have been made drunk by the wine of her immorality. All right. America, or this whore, is full of immoralities. So let's go back now to verse 16. It says, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. Okay, so symbolically, the whore is a country. The 10 horns are the EU countries. So those are countries. So it's not literally talking about, it's not literally talking about a dragon and a woman, right? But although that's what John the Revelator saw, but it's speaking about what a country burning another country with fire. And how does one country burn another country with fire? By way of missiles, right? These nuclear ICBM missiles, right? Intercontinental ballistic missiles. So as we continue to watch, we're seeing the tensions, between America and its allies continue to grow. All right. And the Lord said how that if a kingdom be divided amongst itself, it cannot stand, right? Let's pull that in the NLT. Mark chapter 3, verse 24. It says, a kingdom divided by civil war will collapse, which, we see that happening even within America and in different countries as well, which is end time prophecy. Similarly, a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And majority, if not all of these European countries are, ran by Edomites. Okay. America is ran by Edomites, right? The French are Edomites. The Germans are Edomites. The Britons right now are Edomites. So these are all, even the Russians, for the most part are Edomites. Although you do got Israelites over there, you got Israelites, within all of these nations, but the ones that are in authority, right, are Esau, Edom. So they're feuding amongst each other. The house of Esau, the dukes of Edom, are feuding amongst each other. So the Lord says what? Similarly, a family splintered by feuding will fall apart. And if Satan is divided and fights against himself, how can he stand? He will never survive. Right? And that's what we're seeing, right? We're seeing Esau just divided through bickering, arguing, not trusting each other, not trusting, not having good dealings with each other. The people are not trusting its own government. So we can clearly see that we're at a point where Esau's kingdom, right, which is in the power of Satan, is at its end. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I'm gonna close it out with that. Lord willing, this was edifying unto the elect, giving all praises to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwadash, Shalom.